You're listening to Thursday Night Tailgate, where NFL legends live on, with Chris Mascaro and Bob Lasseri. Available on TuneIn and Podbean. Now, back to Chris and Bob.
Just listen.
All right, now back with us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is former Detroit Lions Pro Bowl wide receiver Herman Moore. Let me give you some more background on Herman. He's from Danville, Virginia, played his college ball at the University of Virginia, where he remains first all-time in average yards per reception with 22. He's second in total receiving yards at just over 2,500 and second in receiving touchdowns with 27. In 1990, he became the all-time ACC leader in single-season receiving yards at just under 1,200. He was a consensus All-American that season and finished sixth in the Heisman Trophy balloting. In 2010, he was selected to the State of Virginia Sports Hall of Fame. He was a first-round draft pick, the 10th overall selection by the Detroit Lions in 1991, and he played in the league from 91 to 2002. And all but one of those seasons was in Detroit. He played his final season with the New York Giants. He was selected to 4 consecutive Pro Bowls from 1994 to 1997. He led the league in receptions twice, and he finished his career with 670 receptions for 9,174 yards. He scored 62 touchdowns. All three are second all-time in Detroit Lions history, and we're honored that he is back with us tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Herman, Chris, and Bob here. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Hi, Herman. Pleasure. Hey, thank you guys both. Thanks for having me.
So, Herman, I wanted to start our time with you tonight by talking about your alma mater, the University of Virginia. Program has struggled a little bit over the last decade, 2-10 last year. They're off to a 1-1 start, though, this year. How do you feel about, your alma mater and the direction that they're headed right now?
Well, when Bronco Mendenhall came in, I think there was a lot of excitement. I think there still is a lot of excitement about the Cavaliers. However, they just have not been able to produce the results. Last year, only having 2 wins was a little bit of a downer. I mean, not even a little bit. It was a big downer because there was so much expectation and hype going into the season that they were expecting to get better performances, but they just could not kickstart the offense. The defense had some holes, of course, and they just could not compete at the level that you need to if you're going to start moving forward. And after Mike London and the era that he had there, and people, Mike had some up and down years. However, they felt the program was still moving in the right direction in terms of recruiting. I thought they had some pretty good recruiting years leading up even to the time before Bronco came in. But unfortunately, it just did not, when it was time to step up and play not just the top teams like Louisville and Clemson, or not even Clemson, but Louisville and some of the other teams they played that year. They just did not have the competitive spirit I felt that you expected to see from a team coached by Bronco.
So to that end, Herman, if that's not meeting your expectations, right? And I'm sure other alumni and that are so ingrained in that program and the folks of that. What do they got to do? What's got to change in order for them to be more competitive in the ACC?
Well, to be competitive, you got to be able to recruit. The only way you can recruit and continue to get the good in-state and get some of the kids out of state that are top talent around the country is you got to be able to produce wins. Right now, Virginia's not that team. Right now, when you look at even this season this year, the win over William and Mary, 28-10, that was a good victory. It's one that they expected. I think most people expected them to go really 3-0 in the first 3 games. Indiana was a tough loss. They got really not anything on offense, and it's just not a team that's able to produce those big plays. To step up and be able to be competitive right now, they're going to have to be able to get this team to play at least at the level of the talent that they have. And right now, I think they're underachieving. I won't say this is the most talented team, but I think they're capable of a lot more. But the schedule is only going to get tougher, and I just don't see this turning out to be a great year for the Cavaliers.
So, Herman, I want to go back to your time there, and you and Sean Moore, who was your quarterback, and Terry Kirby. You guys made an outstanding trio over the last couple of seasons you were at Virginia. Talk about what it was like playing alongside those guys.
Wow, you're taking me way back. Playing with Terry Kirby from over in Taft, Virginia, Sean Moore out of Martinsville, and myself. I mean, you start to acquire these guys, a good talented group of guys, and I started to look back, and when we talked about some of the things we may talk about on the show, with that team, we started to really change the face of Virginia football. And it started probably a few years before that. And I was a redshirt freshman in Virginia in 1987. And we were just on the cusp. We went to the All-American Bowl against BYU, and then the bowl game became the expectation. It became the benchmark, competitive positioning in the ACC, if not even we're trying to win the ACC every year. And we started to build that culture. And we did that because we had great players, and we had very good players like Terry Kirby, Sean Moore, Chris Slade, Ray Roberts, Matt Blunden. I mean, we can go on and on. Greg Jeff. We had guys that were all over the NFL, and not just making it to the league, but also making an impact on the league. And so that's how you do it. That's how you start to bring in guys. You develop that talent, and then you take them to the next level, and then the expectation and the bar gets set higher.
Bob, questions for Herman?
Great to speak with you again, Herman. I want to talk about your rookie year, talk about expectations coming into the league as a first-round draft pick, Herman. And you only started one game. It seemed like you did a lot of observing, but you had some good players to look up to, like a Perryman and guys like that. Just wondering what that first year was like, Herman. Was it disappointing that you didn't play as much as you wanted, or were you like a sponge collecting information, which would make you go on to have such a great career?
Well, to take your audience back a little bit, when I came in 1991, the Detroit Lions, there was a quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner, Andre Ware. You also had Rodney Peete and Eric Kramer. But they really believed Andre Ware was the future. He was a guy that was picked the year before me, first-round pick, and they were running the run and shoot. That was the offense filled with a lot of small players. They were all 5'10" or shorter for the most part. And there was only one guy, Willie Green, that was a little taller, but he wasn't that guy for that system. But when I came in at 6'4", 6'4.5", then we had a guy, Reggie Barrett, we picked in the third or fourth round, who was 6'5". We would dub, basically these new big receivers that were coming into the NFL, and it just did not work with our being in the slot all the time. I was a player in the college that moved around a lot, and then just trying to learn that quick. The ball comes out in like 1 or 2 seconds, and the quarterback's always sprinting right or sprinting left, and there wasn't a lot of traditional drop back passing or anything like that. It was a little bit of a learning curve. I also struggled a little bit just getting acclimated to the speed of the NFL. But those 12 games that I sat and I watched, I learned quite a bit, and I learned how to be a NFL football player without being destroyed right out the gate.
You also had the honor of watching Barry Sanders a lot, Herman, which isn't a bad thing. And, I'm checking out his stats from that year, almost 1,600 yards rushing, 4.5 yards per carry. We used to watch him on TV, Herman. It always looked like the guy was running left to right. And then it was amazing to watch that man run. But more than that, I always respected how the guy carried himself. Same with you, Herman. Not a big celebratory guy on touchdowns. Was that something that was way in your past that you learned to be humble? How did that all shake out with you guys?
Well, coming from a program like Virginia, it was a team sport, and it wasn't where you get into those big celebrations. George Welsh, my college coach, he wasn't going to go for that. He really frowned upon any guys having celebratory dances and all that stuff, or doing anything that was really considered unsportsmanlike. However, going into the NFL is a show. It's entertainment, so that's not frowned upon. However, you talked about a guy, Barry Sanders. He really was one that if you looked at how he carried himself, how, everyone talks about, play like you've been there, and when you score a touchdown, just give it to the official. Now, I have to admit, I wasn't always in that mindset, because it takes a lot to get into the end zone. So when I got there, I really wanted to celebrate a lot more, because it's not an easy feat. But a consummate professional in Barry Sanders, he was a creator. He was definitely one of those quiet leaders who did it more by example than by vocal. And when you have a player like that, I think it starts to really go over the team. It spread really and became very viral with the team. And I just was appreciative of the opportunity to play with him and play with Brett Perriman, who you mentioned, who I thought was a very underrated receiver, playing a number 2, but could have easily been a 1 in the NFL, even though he was smaller in stature. But he played with a big heart. And I was just blessed to have a lot of veteran players on that team that year.
Herman, I got a couple of more for you for your time back at the University of Virginia. And your second season, 1989, you guys go up to Happy Valley and you beat number 12 ranked Penn State 14-6. It was their first season, the first time they had lost an opening game in 25 years at that time. You scored both touchdowns in that game, a 24 and an 11-yard catches. Talk about what you remember about going up to Happy Valley and getting that win.
I remember one thing about the win, and that was I think they were a highly ranked football team, and it was the first time in our team history we had beat a top ranked team like that for a few years. I mean, it had been a while, even though we played some nationally ranked teams. It had taken us a few years since our last victory over one. With Penn State, Joe Paterno coach team, it's going to be gritty. They're going to have a good defense. And for us, our defense did a phenomenal job against their offense. And they really, I thought, did a great job in the first half. I think they also did a great job in the second half to where we basically shut them down. And that was a great win for us. And the ability for us to come away with a victory in such a big game on the road was great. And to catch 2 touchdown passes and end up in I think it was Sports Illustrated. Hey, I was in heaven.
The opposite side of that coin, Herman, the following year, you guys get all the way up to number 1 in the country in mid-October. And then Georgia Tech comes in and ekes by you guys on a last-second field goal, 41-38. And you guys would go on, unfortunately, to lose 4 of the last 5 games after that. Did that loss, was it that deflating, to have gotten, as far, you've climbed the mountain, you've gotten to number 1, and then you lose a heartbreaker, and then it at least appears on paper that you guys might have gone into a funk. What was it like, having come out of that game, lose that game, and then the rest of the year? Was it tough to get over?
It was weird because we clawed so hard to get to that ranking, and once we started seeing that, everyone was like, wow, this Virginia team started to get noticed. We were racking up all these yards. The defense was shutting down people. I mean, we were putting up all these points, and we were just having a phenomenal season. And then when we were playing Georgia Tech, we had every bit of confidence that we were going to win that game, and we jumped out on them. And, I mean, we just really stepped on their throat. And in the second half, somehow defensively collapsed. And offensively, we started to stall. And we had some really tough plays in the second half that allowed them to kind of claw their way back and then to lose on a game-winning field goal. And really to just kind of, we really lost that game because of just mistakes, just mental mistakes that were made. And from there, we never recovered. I think the all that emotion that it took to get there, once we lost that momentum and we lost that feeling of being on top, and what it took to get there and how everyone said we didn't deserve it, we struggled. We had Sean Moore, who got injured, I think, against the University of Maryland, our leading quarterback, and he was going to be out for a period of time and hopefully get him back for a bowl game. And ultimately, we just never regained that confidence or that swag that we had that elevated us to that level. And it was unfortunate because I really felt that although Georgia Tech went on to be co-champions, national champions with University of Colorado, that was really our opportunity, probably one of the greatest, if not, I don't know when the next time it may happen for Virginia to end up with a national championship.
And Herman, you mentioned unfortunate, and we've seen an unfortunate incident at the right outside the University of Virginia this year, up there in Charlottesville. So, the recent protest and the counter protest and the violence that ensued took place, right outside there. And I know you've spoken on this, since it happened. But what do you think? What do you think about when you saw what went on, and what's your message been to people about what took place up there?
When I first learned about it, I was actually on the road and at another event, and I happened to see there's a very good close friend of mine that lives in Charlottesville that contacted me, and she was mentioning that there was this thing that was taking place in Charlottesville, and they knew that this was going to take place. They had something occur previously earlier in the summer with the protest and the march, and then to have it come back at the magnitude and all the national coverage that started to lead up to it. And then when it broke out in violence and unfortunately someone losing their life, this became a it was already a serious situation, but it became even worse because of the tragedy, because of the division that was trying to be thrust upon Charlottesville, for people who are there, is a friendly place. It is a place where people get along. It's a place where people have really what we call that Southern hospitality. And to all of a sudden have it look like it was this battle zone that was taking place was shocking. For me, and I'm from there, and I know more about it, so I can't even imagine what the national perception was of Charlottesville. But I'm just glad to see that it's moving forward. But I know that it's going to be a while before all that community heals, and I don't know if it ever will, because we have uncovered the hate that's taking place in this country. We've uncovered really this underlying I don't know. It's just a mentality that just will not go away, and we just really need to realize there are some things that are far greater that are taking place. That means that we have to get along versus pulling each other apart, and that's the message that you get from the citizens of Charlottesville, and that's why you saw them come out and support and against it. And a lot of people may not even like that. There may even be some of the listeners who disagree with all the things that were taking place and all the, siding with one or the other. But what we have to realize is that we're doing harm no matter what. And if we don't figure this thing out and figure out how do we get along, how do we put the past behind us and heal ourselves going forward.
Let's go on the opposite side on a happier, much happier note. Like I mentioned in your intro, Herman, you were inducted into the Virginia State Sports Hall of Fame. For all of us who will never know what that's like, what's it like being recognized at that level by your home state?
That was important to me. There's the College Football Hall of Fame. There's a National Football Hall of Fame, or the Canton Football Hall of Fame. But when it's something special about the state, because when you're at home, you're amongst a lot of people who have come out of the same state that you've come out of, that have done some phenomenal things in their sport. It takes a lot to get to the apex and the pinnacle of your sport. It takes a lot of luck. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of help to get there. And when you are there and you get nominated in, that means someone paid attention. It means that people want to recognize you for those accomplishments. So I was humbled. I was very thankful for those, and it was even more special because even though I had a tough time with Bobby Ross, who was my coach with the Lions, and he and I didn't always see eye to eye, and there were some rough patches, he was one of the people who was instrumental in actually getting me nominated into the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame, and I'm always thankful of him and also of all those that felt that I was deserving of that. And there's so many people that come out of our state that have done some phenomenal things.
So Herman, before we let you go, remind our listeners, how can they stay up to date with all the great things that you're doing, whether it's online or it's over social media?
Yep. If you want to check me out on social media, you can go to my Twitter account, which is @HMan84. If you want to also check me out and see what I'm up to on my personal website, they can go to HermanMoore84.com. Again, that's HermanMoore84.com, and check me out there. And if they ever want to get in touch with me, I have a portal there for contact, and I always like to keep up with people. So I try and be on top of my social media, but sometimes, especially during the football season, it gets a little tough, which I should be doing a lot more. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more on top of that, but definitely there. And also you can find me on Facebook.
Well, Herman, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to come back on the show. You're always so fantastic. We hope you'll come back and do it again sometime. Love to catch up with you later on in the season, continue to get more of your stories and your insights.
Yep, absolutely. Anytime you guys want some insight on Detroit Lions too, just let me know, and we'll talk some Lions football or the NFC North.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Herman. Take care. All the best to you and your family.
Same to you both. Thank you for having me.
Take care, Herman.
All right. Take care, Herman. That is former Detroit Lions Pro Bowl wide receiver Herman Moore. A lot of great stuff there, Bob, and particularly not just talking about his past at the University of Virginia, his insights and his thoughts about what took place in Charlottesville, and then what a great wide receiver he was.
Oh, Chris, he again, without sounding dramatic, probably had the best 3 consecutive seasons I've ever seen. between 95 and 97. People forget because he played with some not-so-good teams. Detroit never got all the headlines, but caught, I think, 340 passes in 3 years, Chris. The numbers are astounding, but we'll talk to him more about that next time. But and a very, very intelligent man, as you could see, and we're honored to have him on the phone.
Yes, we are.